boring just sitting here.
Okay, 10-4. That's good.
No visual.
Move up, move up.
Are they dead?
Check arms, check arms. Those are bands.
Are you got him up? I thought some. God damn.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The dead man is like. Woo.
That was fucking awkward.
That was fucking awkward.
They're all out there. I don't know how I didn't get fucking hit there, but I just fucking.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm with you on that one. I don't fucking know.
That was fucking funny.
It's been a long time since I made a review, so I'll go through how these work. It starts with some basic info on the gun, plus how much ammo I've put through it, and the upgrades I've installed. Then I discuss 5 things I liked about the gun, and 5 things I disliked, with a conclusion on whether I think it's worth owning. The CYMA CM.048M is a replica of the AKM. Its overall length is 915 millimeters, the barrel length is 455 millimeters, the weight is 2.95 kilograms. It uses a version 3 gearbox with 7mm bushings. The battery compartment is in the buttstock. The connectors are small Tamiya. It has a muzzle energy of 1.8 joules out of the box, with a rate of fire of 750 RPM on a 9.6 volt battery. The price ranges from $230 to $350 US depending on where you look. I've put approximately 42,000 rounds through it. As for upgrades, there are far too many to read off, so I'm just going to put a written list on screen for those who care.
It's got the chassis rigidity and safety of a Mercedes with the sportiness and responsiveness of a BMW.
They're better than plastic, but still not the greatest. It's nice to have something that doesn't feel fragile, but the wood and metal still have that bottom of the barrel feel to them. Granted, for the price you pay and the weight of the gun, it's hard to complain. Completely unrelated, but I have an acquaintance who collects and sells antiques, and he's shown me BB guns made in the 50s from stamped sheet metal that feel sturdier than this.
Which, by the way, fuck China. Just want to make that clear. Fuck China. Fuck you.
I'm just going to copy Garand Thumb and go tip to butt for this one. The front sight and gas block have poor fitment with the outer barrel. The outer barrel wobbles a bit in the trunnion, even with the barrel screw tightened. The gas tube retaining lever flops around. The rivets holding the commie rail on the receiver loosened under the weight of the mount I was using, so the rail had to be secured with JB welds since I don't have the tools to redo the rivets.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
If you're going to complain that I refer to the receiver side rail as the commie rail, please be advised that I do not care. The selector feels like crap. I bent the arm to increase the friction, but the nub that drops into the notches on the receiver has worn down and now it's slippery again. The thread stripped for the bottom stock tang screw, so I had to drill and retap the hole for a larger screw. The stock itself feels way too chintzy to trust the sling mount, so I tried one of these QD sling cup brackets. It works well enough with a single point, but it digs into your hand sometimes.
Upgrades, people, upgrades!
It's a bog standard AK pattern V3. Most of the parts are interchangeable with a V2, and the ones that aren't are just as easy to source. I personally consider the V3 to be superior to the V2. The front end of the shell is sturdier and takes more stress before cracking. It has fewer screws, which makes it easier to pull apart and put back together. The external wire harness is more forgiving with aftermarket MOSFETs that require a third signal wire. Having a proper motor cage is better than using the pistol grip as a cage because I don't have to worry about stripping these stupid fucking threads. The stock internals turned out to be pretty typical of CYMA. That's why I had such a long list of upgrades. Except for the motor and gears, which have held up much better than most stock drivetrains do.
Look at this shit! Look at this stupid bullshit!
I thought the battery compartment was a selling point when I picked this gun out, since it was the perfect shape to fit the 9.6 volt nunchuck NIM batteries I'd standardized my collection on at the time. Now that I've moved towards a variety of lipos, the appeal is gone and I'm left with what is possibly the worst battery compartment I've ever used. The process to change the battery is slow, delicate, requires a tool, and involves small fasteners. You start by removing 2 screws that hold the butt plate in place. Take the butt plate off, disconnect the old battery, connect the new one, put the butt plate back on and tighten the screws. The screws thread into these wood screws that thread into the stock with right-hand threads. Thanks to the wood being so cheap, tightening the butt plate screws so much as a single inch-pound past finger tight will rotate the wood screws and cause them to strip out of the holes they thread into. I put some electrical tape over the screws so that they stay captive in the plate when I take it off, but everything else about the process is still a pain in the ass. If my battery dies mid-game, I'm not going to be swapping it out until I've at least been hit and walk back to spawn, or after the round ends. On the off chance I have a lipo fire, the compartment is sealed well enough that I probably won't realize the battery is burning until smoke is creeping out of the receiver and the inside of the stock looks like reactor number 4. On top of all of that, removing the gearbox from the receiver means that you have to feed your battery connector through a tiny hole in the ass end of the receiver. This hole is only big enough for small Tamiya connectors. If you want to use Deans instead, you'll have to trim the corners of the connector like this. If you've seen my other videos, you'll know that this segment would normally include more pictures and videos of everything I've described. You may be wondering why I haven't done this. Well, I got so sick of this battery compartment that I converted the wire harness to a top rear configuration, and I'm not going to convert it back just to demonstrate how terrible it was.
Yeah, buddy! Lightweight!
At just under 3 kilos, this gun is pretty light for a full-size full metal AK. It's light because the metal is cheap and a little shitty, but lightweight is still good. Weight is particularly important for AKs for reasons that I'll get into later.
It's time for the hot shit! I'm the hot king of this shit!
1.8 joules is too damn hot. I know Canadian import regulations are largely to blame for this problem, but it's still annoying. Other brands managed to make their guns import compliant without making them too spicy to game out of the box. This made the lack of a quick change spring guide a bit annoying, but you need to take the gearbox out of the receiver to access the QCS on an AK anyway, so it was only slightly annoying.
And the thing's put together. See, even an amateur engineer like me can figure out how to get this back.
CYMA makes clones of VFC-spec AKs and TM-spec AKs. This one is a VFC clone, which means it's easier to work on and more durable than a TM clone. If you want to see what the difference is, I'll include links to disassembly videos for both designs in the description. The one drawback to VFC-spec is the main pin, which can fall out as the pinhole in the receiver wears out from repeated disassembly.
Брось его нахуй! Вот так, блядь, надо нахуй! Понимаешь?
Так точно.
Заново нахуй! Да долбоёб! Отстегнешь ночью жене, блядь!
We've officially reached the point in this review where I start running out of things to say about this model of AK and start getting into traits of the platform in general. When it comes to AEGs, the standard style AK hop-up is one of the less user-friendly designs on the market. The slider makes fine adjustments difficult, and gearbox vibrations will make the slider walk forward, forcing you to readjust the hop routinely, possibly while other people are shooting at you. You can adjust the friction of the slider by putting some gearbox shims beneath this screw on the right side of the chamber. This will make the slider walk forward more slowly, increasing the amount of shooting you can do before needing to readjust. The slider also needs to be pulled all the way back in order to remove the barrel groove, which maxes out the hop. If you forget to move the slider forward before taking the inner barrel out of the chamber, you may damage the bucking or the tensioner. Attempting to shoot the gun with the hop maxed out can also damage the bucking. I wrecked a few buckings before I got into the habit of moving the slider fully forward upon reassembling the gun. This really isn't that big of a deal once you get in the habit, but it's not something you have to think about with most other platforms. The factory slider has numbered lines on it, so you can commit your preferred hop setting to memory and make readjusting that much quicker. Unfortunately, the factory slider was made of metal, which made getting the right amount of friction practically impossible. It was only ever too tight or too loose. The metal used was also fairly brittle and didn't take too long for the slider to crack. I replaced the slider with a plastic one made by APS. It has numbered lines like the original, and it's worked much better since its friction can be adjusted much more finely with the aforementioned shims, and it flexes instead of just cracking. There are some rotary style hop-ups on the aftermarket, but they're expensive and I'm poor, so we're not going to talk about them. I know. It's slower than an AR.
Good teamwork there.
But I don't care. Because this shit right here, this shit activates my neurons. I'd like to think this is common knowledge, but as a quick side note, if you use a vertical foregrip and it's too long or mounted too close to the mag well, it will interfere with reloading.
There it is. There it is. Everything.
From the moment I understood the weakness of my flesh, it disgusted me.
When I think of modularity, I'm concerned with the mounting of grips, lights, lasers, and their controls, muzzle devices, stocks, and most importantly, optics. Let's go through each of those points one by one and see how this gun holds up. When it comes to grips, you have railed handguards made from both plastic and metal. I'm not a fan of these for reasons that will be explained later. Some of the metal designs look like free float tubes, but don't actually free float the barrel. They screw into barrel bands that secure to the barrel with small set screws that will probably walk out over time if they aren't given Loctite. If you want to be an absolute fucking Chad, there's also the classic Romanian dong. I sadly couldn't track one down myself, so I made my own 3D printed forend, the Cyber Dong. It has a single slot worth of rail on the front for a light, and that's all it needs because I'm too poor for night vision and thus don't need to mount a laser. Speaking of which, the aforementioned handguards can also host lights and lasers. However, the plastic ones can't be trusted to hold zero, and neither can some of the metal ones. Barrel clamp rails seem like an affordable alternative that can be trusted to hold zero, if you don't mind your light or laser being mounted further forward where it can mess with the gun's balance. The muzzle has standard 14mm counterclockwise threads for whatever muzzle devices you want to use. This is noteworthy in the same way it is noteworthy for a car to have doors. As for customizing the stock, there's lots of aftermarket options, but most of them are meant for receivers with rear trunnions that accept side folding stocks. The few options I could find for fixed stock trunnions had questionable quality or were out of stock. And lastly, optics. There are 4 common styles of optics mounts that range from terrible to tolerable. There's dust cover rails, which will host optics above the gun's center of balance, right in front of your face where they should be. This would be ideal if they actually held zero, but they don't because the dust cover needs to be easily removable for battery changes. Commie rail mounts are supposed to be quick detach and retain zero no matter how many times you take them off. In my experience, they've only ever done the first thing. If you decide to leave the mount on, it gets in the way during battery changes and creates extra bulk on the left side of the gun, which complicates storage and transport. Your optic probably won't even be centerline with the bore, because while we can put a man on the moon, we cannot measure the width of an AK receiver with a $20 set of calipers and divide by 2. It is simply impossible. Trust me, I've tried. There's also mounts that replace your rear sight with a few slots of rail, but I haven't bothered to mess with them because they block access to the outer barrel screw, which is necessary for cleaning the inner barrel. Their limited rail space and their forward location also means that most prismatic optics are off the table. That leaves the gas tube rail. As you may have guessed by the gameplay in this video, it is the mounting setup I dislike the least. This is different from railed upper handguards. Those are cringe, and I hate them. Railed handguards are installed like normal ones and lack rigidity as a result, whereas a gas tube rail is a gas tube with a rail milled into it and clamps to secure it to the barrel. This is important because it's rigid, doesn't interfere with any other functions or disassembly processes, and doesn't need to be re-zeroed after you take the barrel group out for cleaning. To my knowledge, no other style of optic mount for AKs is capable of this. Just clamp the rail onto the barrel, bolt the optic onto the rail, zero the optic, and never touch it again. The drawback is that it's too far forward for pretty much all prismatic optics to be usable. Even if you find one with enough eye relief, having that much weight up front is probably going to throw off the gun's balance a lot. So you're limited to reflex sights, but you still sort of need to pay attention to the size and weight of the optic if you want to preserve the balance. On top of that, the optic is sitting in the perfect spot to get in the way of pressure pads and a lot of simple and practical weapon light setups. It also gets in the way of your thumb if you like to C-clamp your guns like I do. You can fix the second problem and sort of fix the first one if you mount the sight a little further forward, but the cable management for pressure pads is kinda awkward, and having your optic that far forward makes everybody look at you like you're wearing your pants inside out on purpose. As a final note, keep in mind that a lot of these accessories add weight to the gun, regardless of how functional or dysfunctional they may be. This is why I appreciate this gun being as light as it is in its factory state. There's no real standard specifications for external AK parts either. Some are made so cheaply they may not even fit on the branded model they're advertised for. Be ready to bust out your Dremel, a drill, and maybe some hand files to partake in some Bubba shit whenever you want to modernize an AK. Or just a roll of SpongeBob duct tape. That's probably easier. I've ragged on this gun pretty hard, but that doesn't mean I don't like it. It has some quirks, and it took a great deal of tinkering to be made gameable, but now it's a workhorse. A lightweight and reliable one too. It'll never be my first choice for serious milsims, but for walk-on skirmishes it's hard to beat a classic, especially when they come this cheap. Granted, some of the prices I saw this gun going for in certain parts of the world were a bit high. Maybe suck it up and save a little extra for something a bit nicer if that's the case where you live. Otherwise, buy a CYMA AK. Just maybe not this one. That battery compartment really sucks.
Copy that.
If you're watching this far into the video, you're a real one. Thanks. Sorry in advance if it's a bit less watchable than my content usually is. I stumble over my words a lot and I normally edit that out. I feel like there's a bit of an elephant in the room. My videos have never really been frequent, but for the first year or so this channel existed, they were at least consistent. By videos, I mean the real ones. The ones that are edited, or the ones where I'm talking about some experience I have with a piece of equipment, or just how to be a better player. I'm not talking about the quick little shit posts, or just raw gameplay I upload for the hell of it. Many of those real videos were made during a chapter of my life that's since concluded. I was a NEET back then. I had the time to write a script only to sit at my computer staring at an empty Google Doc for hours because writer's block was keeping me from figuring out where to start or make my thoughts into words. I had the time to go out into the woods in January to throw a shitty bipod as far as I could, just for a quick gag. I had the time to comb over 2 or 3 hours of GoPro footage every week and timestamp all of the clips I thought would come in handy for different video ideas. I'm still holding on to video files from 2, 3, 4 years ago because they have clips in them that will be perfect for videos I'm nowhere even close to making. Then the coup happened. The only social interaction I got during that time was through airsoft. When the fields were locked down, I didn't even get that. The isolation really scattered my focus, but it didn't shatter it. Then the government tried to ban airsoft. That did shatter my focus. Then I got a job. What little spare time and mental focus I did have went towards lobbying against the ban and volunteering for my candidate of choice when the election came around. Then they tried to ban airsoft a second time, and we actually stopped them ourselves that time. I've been stressing over it for so long that it feels like my soul is still kind of tensed up, like it's flinching to take a punch in the gut. I think that's because I know they'll probably come for us again. Someday. I don't like thinking about that. More recently, I found God. I met a lot of very good people through him. Some of which I've actually introduced to airsoft. I'm a lot less lonely now, but I also have even less time to work on videos, because I'm spending more time with more people. Hell, I'm actually taking time off of work just to be a hermit and make this review. So yeah, I'm not saying it's not worth sticking around on this channel if you're a long-time viewer, but I am telling you that I might not be able to do so myself going forward. Not going to delete anything though. I worked way too hard making all of these videos. Made too many memories along the way as well. If you know me outside of YouTube, you know where to find me. Let me know what you think of this. But if all I am to you is a dastardly bastard, this is sort of a goodbye. Or not. Time will tell.